Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a problem that, let's be honest, probably sounds way too familiar. You know, the project that looks amazing on paper, but somehow goes completely off the rails. We're going to uncover the hidden dysfunctions and the sneaky political games that can sink even the best teams.
I mean, think about it. You've got a sharp team, you've got a solid plan, the requirements seem clear, everything is humming along. But then you start to feel it. Little slips, the pressure starts to build, and before you know it, everyone is just desperately scrambling to hit a date on a calendar. And all that focus on quality? Yeah, that just goes right out the window. But what if the problem isn't the plan at all? What if the problem is the very rulebook we're all playing by? All right, let's get right into it with our first section, what I'm calling the project management paradox. The source material makes this really fascinating point. Projects hardly ever fail because people are incompetent or don't know what they're doing. They fail because the right things don't get done. And a lot of the time, it's because of good intentions that just go wrong. I love this quote from the source. It's so blunt, but it's so true. It hits on this fundamental idea that you can have the most brilliant project manager on the planet, but if they're trying to squeeze results out of a fundamentally flawed idea or a bad implementation, well, it's just not going to work. See, management is supposed to be a force multiplier, not some kind of magic wand. And that's huge, because it means we have to stop looking at the managers and start looking deeper for the real source of our problems. So, and this is the key takeaway. The breakdown doesn't usually happen in that big, beautiful project plan, nope. It happens because we're all operating based on these unspoken and often totally wrong assumptions about how work actually gets done. In this explainer, we are going to pull back the curtain on the biggest myth of all, the one that sinks projects time and time again. So let's talk about the big one, the myth of the schedule. This is this deep-seated belief that the schedule, the deadline, is the single most important measure of success. But as we're about to see, obsessing over a date on a calendar can actually become the single biggest threat to your entire project. And right here, this is the core of the delusion. Management thinks an aggressive schedule is going to light a fire under the team, right? Get everyone motivated. But the source is really clear on this. It doesn't motivate people to work better or smarter. It just motivates them to take really risky shortcuts that will absolutely come back to bite them later. This is where the dysfunction starts. The pressure for speed actively works against the goal of building something good. And all that pressure leads to this toxic corporate game the author calls schedule chicken. And it's exactly what it sounds like, like the game with two cars heading for each other. Well, here you've got multiple teams, all heading for a project collision. Each one is reporting, everything's green, we're on track, basically daring the other teams to be the first one to swerve and admit they're actually behind. The last one to admit it might save face for a minute, but the project, it almost always crashes. And this is just a perfect and kind of absurd example. The source tells a story where a hardware team delivers a dev board to the software team, right on schedule. Boom, milestone hit, check the box. Only one tiny problem. It didn't have a processor on it. So when the software lead pointed out that it was, completely useless, the response was, this is no time to be changing the requirements. I mean, wow, that's schedule chicken in its purest form. So when the schedule inevitably starts to slip, what's the typical management reaction? Well, they pull out the same old tired playbook. More meetings? Great, now we're spending more time talking about the work instead of doing it. Throwing more people at the problem late in the game? That's a classic. Now your best engineers have to stop working to train the new people. Mandatory overtime? Awesome for morale. And of course the favorite, let's just cut features and shorten testing. That'll work out great in the end. This constant grinding pressure to hit that date, it creates the perfect breeding ground for our next section, fool's gold and political games. This kind of stress creates a toxic environment where all these dysfunctional behaviors don't just happen, they actually thrive. And the source gives us a really useful vocabulary to spot them. First up is this brilliant term, pyrite engineering. Pyrite is fool's gold, and that's exactly what this is. It's the official name for all those risky shortcuts we were just talking about. It looks like you're saving time. It shines like you're making progress, but it's fake. You're creating what the author calls an intellectual deficit. Basically, you're taking out a high-interest loan against quality, and you will have to pay it back later. And where you find pyrite engineering, you'll often find Teflon management. In these high-pressure worlds, blame is a hot potato. Teflon managers are masters of making sure that when things go wrong, none of that blame ever sticks to them. It all slides right off, and usually lands on the engineers who are, too busy actually trying to fix the problems to play these political games. So, how do you protect yourself from all this? The Source has a great defensive strategy called the Houdini test. The story goes that early in his career, someone sabotaged Houdini's handcuffs. He learned a lesson. From that day on, he always insisted on testing the cuffs, seeing them locked and unlocked before he'd use them. In our world, that means you never ever integrate a component from a vendor until you have seen it work with your own eyes. Okay, so we have diagnosed the disease pretty thoroughly. Now, let's talk about the cure. Our final section is about finding the real gold, and it's all about making a huge mindset shift, moving away from just controlling a schedule and moving towards building a culture of real quality. This right here is the antidote to all that pyrite engineering. So often we see design reviews as this time-consuming thing we can just skip if we're behind schedule. The author argues the exact opposite. A good design review is the best insurance policy you have for your schedule. If you think you don't have time for one, you're probably already in really big trouble. And a real design review has rules. It's not just another meeting to check a box. You get your best people in the room. You send the design out beforehand so people have time to actually think about it, not just show up to correct typos. The reviewers know their job is to find what's wrong. The designer is prepped for criticism. And this is the most important part, you actually fix the problems you find. That is how you find the real gold. So ultimately, it all comes down to this. The entire way we think about it needs to flip. We need to stop managing a schedule and start managing to build a great product. The schedule shouldn't be the master. It should be a servant. It should be a realistic reflection of the actual work it takes to achieve quality, not some arbitrary date that forces you to throw quality away. I want to leave you with this last thought to chew on. The Source quotes that classic line sometimes attributed to Einstein, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And yet, so many companies seem to do exactly that. So I'll ask you, what's the one mistake your organization keeps making? And, more importantly, what are the cultural forces that keep it from ever really getting fixed? It's a tough question for sure, but answering it is the first real step to breaking the cycle. Thanks for watching.